Greetings, friends around the world. This is Dr. Bob Thiel for the Bible News Prophecy Channel. Are European Union leaders pushing Europe towards the apocalypse? If so, how are they doing it? And are many doing them right now? Well, the term apocalypse means revealing. And the last book of the Bible is sometimes called the Apocalypse or the book of Revelation. Are there events going on currently that are leading to the fulfillment of prophecies, or will lead to fulfillment of prophecies in things such as Revelation chapter 17? Well, I say that there are. For example, in May of 2019, there was a debate. It was organized by the European University Institute and the Financial Times. No Eurosceptic or anti-EU party took part in this particular debate, although all the political parties were invited. And as it turns out, all the debaters agreed that more powers had to be transferred to the European Commission and Parliament and less the European Council. Why? Because in the European Council, nation states are represented. Many of you may not be aware, but Europe's basically got two presidents. They have a European Commission president and a European Council president, which are both about to be replaced fairly soon. And the reality is, Europhiles, the people who are big into Europe, or United Europe, they want more power to go to Europe and less to nation states, whereas Eurosceptics want to do the other way around. One of the debaters was Franz Timmermans of the Party of European Socialists, and he argued that Europe was in a do-or-die situation in terms of reform, and warning for the first time in history the EU is in danger of breaking apart. This is in May 2019. Well, as it turns out, about a week before, there was another meeting. This wasn't really a debate, but this was a rally. It was sponsored by the Movement for Europe of Nations and Freedom. And it's a pan-European alliance of 9 nationalist parties. And they want to stop certain things happening to the EU, and they want more national sovereignty from the EU. And partially it was organized by a man by the name of Tomio Okamura. Now he's the president of the Freedom and Democracy Party, and he's a deputy speaker of the Chamber of Deputies. And I'd like to read a few things that he said. Today, Europeans are once again fighting for their survival. It's not just the migration of colonists from Africa and Arab countries that has changed the face of Western Europe. It's also the growing assault from Brussels on the sovereignty of Europe's nation states in the name of multicultural superstate. For those who want to downplay this warning, I would mention a quote from the former president of the European Union, Herman van Rompuy. The time of the homogeneous nation state is over. Each European country has to be open for different cultures. In contemporary Europe, the Brussels aristocracy has no place for nations and no place for democracy either. The former president of the European Parliament, Martin Schulz, has been quoted as saying, "It's not the EU's philosophy that the crowds can decide its destiny." I say clearly that the current EU must end. I remind you that at present, the European Union directives, regulations outranks the laws of EU's member states. The European Parliament is the only place we can change Europe. At least that's his claim. So he's talking about Europe changing, and we see and he's a Eurosceptic, but the Europhiles, they also think Europe needs to change. Will it? Absolutely. But I'd like to read some quotes from some additional Eurosceptics, and I'll get to some other, at least one more Europhile. This is from Gert Wilders. He's a member of Parliament, and he's the chairman of the Party for Freedom. And here's some things he said. Today we're fighting for our existence, and the biggest threats to our survival and our freedom are the European Union, mass immigration, and the Islamic ideology of submission and violence. First, let's talk about the European Union, an undemocratic superstate. It's forcing its commands on the peoples of Europe. It is trying to take away our national sovereignty. And we want to be sovereign, don't we? The European Union is attempting to erase our nation states, but we say no more. Let's say it loud and clear, no more. Our nations are shaped by their own history, culture, language, identity, therefore are impossible to erase. My friends, our countries are strong nations based on a Jewish, Christian, and humanistic civilization. This should never change. So we've got another one, again, complaining about what's going on there. And I've got a couple more I want to read from. Here's one from Gerlof Annemans. He's the president of the Movement for European Nations and Freedom, one who put on this conference. And I'd like to read some things he said. He said, I stand, like all of you, on this central spot of the continent, not only at the crossroads of Europe, but also, and more than ever, we stand at the crossroads of European history. The European Union has become an institution that crushes the peoples of the member states because the big bosses of the European Union want to put their organization to become the one and only superstate on the continent. Our proud nations will be powerless provinces if we let this happen. Well, I'm going to read a prophecy that says it is going to happen. So, these comments from these Eurosceptics were, again, from a meeting, and this was in Prague. Now, I'd like to read something from Marine Le Pen. She's the president of National Rally, also at the same conference. What we see here before our eyes is the emergence of a new European harmony that sees the national parties coming together to offer 500 million Europeans a new framework of cooperation, a new project, and a new momentum for the future. Immigration must be stopped, and Islamic ideology must be eradicated. Islamization and globalism are new totalitarianisms that threaten European countries. Now, she also made some other comments where she's basically not against the idea of an EU, but she wants more of a confederation and member states to have a greater role to say. Now, I noticed that yesterday, the Chancellor of Austria, Sebastian Kurz, made a few comments. So I'd like to read something that he said. A new treaty is needed with clearer sanctions for members who run up debts, punishments for countries that wave through illegal migrants without registering them, as well as tough consequences for breaches of the rule of law and democracy. Much has changed since the 2007 Lisbon Treaty, he said, citing the bloc's debt crisis, euro crisis, migration crisis, climate crisis, and Brexit chaos. They want to change things since the Lisbon Treaty came into effect in 2007. Well, technically it didn't come into effect until 2009, but it was first proposed then. Anyway, will a change happen to the Lisbon Treaty? Yes. It's either going to be changed or it's going to be replaced. How do I know this for sure? Because of biblical prophecy that I'll get to in a few moments. But there's another force involved in all this. Instead of political leaders, what about religious ones? Well, the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences said the European Union is an example of what could become a supranational state. And so you say, okay, it's from one part. What's the Pope think? Well, it turns out that the Pope made some comments in May of 2019. I'd like to read a couple things he said. He says, in the current situation of globalization, not only of the economy, but also of the technological and cultural exchanges, the nation state is no longer able to procure for the common good of its population alone. So we've got Pope Francis going out and saying, it's the end of the nation state. So we've got two basic philosophies going on in Europe. I mean, there's other views, but the two basic ones are, get rid of nation states, make Europe a powerful bloc. The other is, no, it's better to have nation states, and we don't want Europe to be such a bloc. But what's going to happen? What's going to happen is there will be an alliance, a church and state alliance. I'm going to go to the book of Revelation, or the Apocalypse. I'm going to go to Revelation chapter 17. I'm going to read some stuff here, and later some other parts of Revelation 17. And the first part I want to talk about is that there is going to be a church-state alliance. So Revelation 17, we're going to start with verse 1. I'll be reading from the New King James Version of the Bible. Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and talked with me, saying to me, Come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot, who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of their fornication. Now, basically, this is talking about a church-state alliance. Now, what kind of a church? Well, let's continue in verse 3. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a gold cup full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. And on her forehead a name was written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, and of the abominations of the earth. So this is a reference to a compromised church. And we're going to get a little bit more about that in just a moment. So we get some identity of what this is talking about. In verse 9, Revelation 17 says, Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are the 7 mountains on which the woman sits. Now this is commonly understood by Catholic, Protestant, Eastern Orthodox, and Church of God scholars to be a reference to Rome. So there's no argument about that. There's an argument about which time of Rome, what kind of Rome, all that kind of stuff. That this is Rome generally is understood by most theologians who study this type of thing. And to show one more thing related to the fact this is actually a reference to a city, let's read verse 18 of Revelation 17. And the woman whom you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. Again, that's a reference to Rome. Now, it is my position, it long has been my position, that when the Antichrist rises up, he will feign Catholicism, change that particular religion. So, in case you wonder if it's going to be Catholicism the way it's always been, the answer is no. So we're going to have an alliance, a church-state alliance between a compromised church out of Rome as well as European leaders. But isn't the political leadership of Europe very divided? Yes, it is. But that was actually prophesied as well. Huh? Yes, it is. Let's go to the book of Daniel. Daniel chapter 2. We're going to start in verse 41. Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, yet the strength of iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. So basically what this is saying, we're going to have toes, by the way, you have 10 toes. There's going to be 10 regions, and some are stronger and some are weaker, and they're not going to adhere really well. Well, we listened to various EU leaders in the last couple of weeks. All the quotes I've been giving you have been for the last week or two from when I'm doing this. And you've got some, we've got to go this way with Europe, we've got something that way for Europe. And we've got the Church of Rome, Vatican, pushing the Europhile approach. And ultimately that's what's going to happen. Now, don't some leaders in the European Union act like the EU should be eliminated? Yes. But consider something from Revelation chapter 13, verses 3 and 4. And I saw one of his heads as it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world marveled and followed the beast. So they worshipped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like the beast, who's able to make war with him? So notice, in verse 3, it's talking about a mortal wound. People think that Europe has been mortally wounded multiple times. After World War I, World War II, previous times, the old Holy Roman Empire, etc., and ancient Rome. But it's going to rise up again. The world's not going to expect it. Now, is Europe going to become a democracy or totalitarian? Well, the Eurosceptics have got it right. It's going to become totalitarian. Now, we heard from both the Europhiles and the Eurosceptics that they want changes to happen. Will changes happen in Europe? Yes. Will Europe reorganize? Yes. And that's what I was saying toward the beginning. European leaders are actually pushing toward the apocalypse, but they don't realize it. Okay? Let's go to Revelation chapter 17, starting in verse 12 this time, and we're going to read about a coming reorganization. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet, but they received their authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. So notice they don't have a kingdom as of yet. So this is some type of a reorganization. Probably something like 10 regions in Europe. Some of the smaller countries will be put together, and other countries, maybe some bigger countries, will be by themselves. Or they'll cut across national borders. The Bible isn't clear precisely how that's going to be. Other than that, it's going to be a reorganization. But that's not the only part of the reorganization. Now, the first part, in a sense, could be saying, okay, we're going to give regions their own power. Remember, we've got political leaders want nation states having more power, or their culture having more power. And maybe that's what these 10 regions are going to kind of play to. But remember, you got the Europhiles who want a Europe that's totally together with the power. Well, guess what? Verse 13, those 10 regions are going to give that power to one leader. These are of one mind, and they will give their power and authority to the beast. So this is a reorganization that's going to come into Europe, and it's going to be what the Eurosceptics have worried about. Yes, we're going to see a totalitarian government come on in. Now, in the book of Revelation, it talks about this leader rising up. It talks about that he's going to make war against the saints in Revelation 13, for example, verses 6 and 7. But we also hear some other things about this leader. Remember, some of the Eurosceptics were complaining about Islam and people from Islamic lands. Well, this beast power is also called the King of the North in the book of Daniel. And as far as doing stuff with Islam, yes, the time is going to come when Islam is going to be driven out of Europe. We actually have 2 videos. You can also watch the Bible News Prophecy channel. One called Will Islam Be Pushed Out of Europe? And the other is War is Coming Between the Europeans and the Arabs. What's this based upon? My personal speculation? No. It's based upon the Bible. Book of Daniel, chapter 11. I want to read verses 40 to 43, but this time I'd like to do it from the New Jerusalem Bible, which is a Roman Catholic translation of the Bible into English. Starting in verse 40, Daniel chapter 11. When the time comes for the end, the king of the south will try conclusions with him, but the king of the north will come storming down on him with chariots, cavalry, a large fleet. He will invade countries, overrun them, and drive on. He will invade the land of splendor, and many will fall. But Edom, Moab, and what remains of the sons of Ammon will escape him. He'll reach out to attack countries. Egypt will not escape him. The gold and silver treasures and all the values of Egypt will lie in his power. Libyans and Cushites will be at his feet. This is a prophecy. The time is going to come when the European leader, this beast power, who's also called the King of the North, is going to go against basically a power in predominantly Islamically dominated lands. Okay, Egypt, Libya, the Cushites in the Middle East are predominantly Islamic, and so they are going to be driven out. There are issues in Europe. There are problems in Europe. The left wants reorganization. The right wants reorganization. If you want to call the left the Europhiles and the right the Eurosceptics. The Bible says such a reorganization is going to happen. There will be changes coming to the Lisbon Treaty, and or it will be replaced by itself. European leaders on both sides of the aisle are actually pushing for change that will ultimately lead to the apocalypse and what's prophesied in the book of Revelation, even though they don't understand. That's where it's going to lead to. If you believe this book and believe what's written in this book, you will know that reorganization is coming to Europe, as we mentioned from Revelation 17, verses 12 to 13. And if you look in the 21st century, look in the spring of 2019, many European leaders are calling for change. And the changes will ultimately, not in 2019, but ultimately lead to fulfillment of Revelation 17, 12 to 13. So yes, European leaders are pushing toward the apocalypse unknowingly. This is Dr. Bob Thiel for the Bible News Prophecy Channel.